What is going on, friends? We're back with small ball. Here we go, small ball on a Monday. So last week, let's just get this out of the way. Last week was kind of a mess. We are live, and I'm going to notify the world that we're live. But let's just get this out of the way, right? Last week, and even the week before, a little bit, kind of a mess. Kind of a mess in the small ball uh, community. So I apologize. I lost my voice. I guess it was Wednesday. And then Thursday also. So I couldn't actually do the show Wednesday or Thursday. So that was unfortunate. But as I hear notify the world, we are back. Yeah, it was kind of annoying. Yeah, it was tough. It was tough. But we're back. And like I have said in the past, I'm going to start transitioning into a new schedule. So I have figured out what that's going to look like. It's going to be a Sunday for now, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, no Wednesday, and then Thursday. So still 4 days a week. I'm gonna do when the Major League season begins. The show is gonna start when all of the 7 o'clock games are over. If one of them goes into extra innings, depending, we'll see. But I'm gonna wait for those to finish, and then I'm going to get into my show. And as I believe when the school year is over for you school folk, I'm going to do a noon show. Same schedule, noon show during the week, and then on Sundays it'll be a night show right after Sunday night baseball. So it'll be like noon, and then if there are day games that day, I'll be done right before that, so we can transition into that, and we'll obviously talk a little bit more about that as we go. But welcome back to Small Ball. So do me a favor and comment when you think. So if you want me to start with the schedule now, like if I should go this Sunday and then take Wednesday off next Wednesday, or this Wednesday off. I'm going to stick with this because this has been working, but I think as the season approaches, the Sunday and then Monday, Tuesday, Thursday schedule works better. And it's unfortunate that I have to do a night show right in the middle of the 10 o'clock games because I always love those. I like watching 7 o'clock games and then having more baseball to watch after that. But I'm going to try to do my night show still then, and because the mornings get tough, because the mornings is really when I do a lot of my research, and especially during the season, I watch all of the condensed games, and that takes quite some time. So, we gotta sort of weigh our options as we all know. So, again, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to try to remember to keep my voice down because I think this show actually played a role in me losing my voice. I don't think that was the entirety of it. But I'm going to try to keep my voice a little bit on the DL. So if you can't hear me, comment, and obviously I'll raise it. But I'm not trying to lose my voice again and miss more shows. So it's Monday. What does that mean? Well, we all know what that means. We have a divisional predictions coming at you. We're going to do the AL West. We're not going to do it right at the moment, though. I am accepting callers, so if you would like to call in, please do so. Monday has been a really cool. We've had this opportunity to take callers now. Monday has been a good day for that. And we're probably going to offer up callers every day, but obviously you guys are busy and whatnot. So let's get to talking. So the big news, spring training, right? It's a tough time because I feel like myself, at least, and I'm going to deal with some callers right now, so I'm going to be multitasking, but I feel like a lot of people, including myself, are sort of fishing for things to, talk about, things to find meaningful. There's a lot of things going on that probably don't mean as much as we think, but we want to extrapolate, right? We see something, we're excited for the season. We're all excited, right? And I think something that has caught my eye this spring training, because a lot of this stuff is meaningful, right? Obviously, you don't want to completely ignore what's going on, but something that has caught my eye, and I think many others as well, is the amount of injuries that are taking place in baseball. And this is confusing me a little bit. And I think that people are overdoing it a little bit, because this does happen every year. And, it's hard to really remember what happened, but it's not like an uncommon thing for like a lot of big name players to go down. But I think this year it's a little bit over the top. And this is confusing me because, to me, the off season, I play baseball. To me, what I'm focused on in the off season is getting healthy, right? Whatever injury or injuries I had during the season, my focus is getting those healthy, right? Strengthening those, muscles or whatever the case may be, so that it doesn't become a problem later. And obviously also strengthening other muscles and whatnot, so that, you're in that preventative sort of a stage. So it's confusing why these players are taking the off season, then getting injured, and now instead of getting ready for the season, they have to rehab. And in baseball, the healing process or the recovery process is a lot slower because, you need to be really 100% in order to do some of the fine motor skills that are required in baseball. Whereas, in maybe like a football, if you're, a left tackle, but your elbow's a little bit banged up, you can kind of make it work. But in baseball, you kind of got to be 100%. And the other reason is that you can't, it's really difficult to jump back in after having not played. So a lot of times you have, guys go on rehab assignments and play in the minors for a little bit. So this is really a difficult issue for teams to deal with when their players are getting hurt and missing spring training, which is the time where you're supposed to be preparing for the season. So from a fan's perspective, it's like, okay, well, he's missing spring training. Not ideal, but at least it's not regular season games. But they have spring training for a reason, right? It's very difficult to, obviously you can't jump back in, but B, also rehabbing during the season isn't really the same. There's something about playing with the whole team, playing against other major league players in a very specifically designed sort of environment to prepare you rather than to, serve as actual gameplay. So missing spring training is something that a lot of players struggle with. And this brings me back to a point that I talked about, I believe it was Tuesday. And it seems to me like the inflation of this analytics movement and this data-driven league, and at times even this sort of computer-driven and technology-driven league, combined now with it seems, inflation in injuries, in recovery time, I think it's very, very possible that those things go hand in hand. Whether that be, these training methods. Keep in mind, I don't know if you guys follow this kind of stuff, but the training regimens are so specifically designed nowadays. They're so tailored to each individual player, right? A power pitcher does this kind of stuff, and the guy who's trying to work on his velocity. And there was a point in time, maybe 40, 50 years ago, when off-season training was playing basketball and, maybe lifting, every once in a while, but not every day, not such specific muscle-oriented, I have to make my lat stronger and my obliques stronger. It was really just sort of a whole body, stay active kind of mentality. And the data is not recognizing this pattern, right, of higher intensity off-season training and higher injury rates yet, right? The data is trying to show us that actually prevents injury, but these things are going hand in hand. We're seeing more data-driven training, and we're seeing more injuries and longer recovery times. And a lot of that has to do with, sort of a more conservative approach to these injuries. But I also think, and this is where it sort of ties into the actual, league, and why am I talking about this? I think the players that have this sort of a very specific, very goal-oriented, individualized mentality, particularly pitchers who are the most individual, probably the most individualized position in, the four major sports outside of probably goalie in hockey, I would say. It's close even. I would have to think about that. I think this mentality is not one that serves a team well. And I think, we talk about intangibles all the time on this show, and they're not at all easy to detect, and obviously not easy to measure. That's why they call them intangibles. So it's really an approach thing, right? And us fans don't really see that, but to me, it seems like these coaches aren't picking up on a very important mentality flaw in a lot of players. And it's really difficult to figure out which of these players have the right sort of team-oriented training mentality. But I think it's just something to look for in spring training in particular, right? Like I talked about Bryce Harper really showing an effort to do a couple more of the little things, right, this spring training. I'm liking what I'm seeing for him, and people sort of look at that and they say, wow, that's great. And then they sort of dismiss it. I see that and I say, somebody who can actually lead a team back to the postseason, where last year or the year before, I really did not see Harper as somebody who could do that. So I think as we approach these next couple of weeks of spring training, I think that's something to look for, right? Who is doing the team-oriented things? Who is doing the, a lot of times we'll have some interviews, some mic'd up kind of stuff. Who is making their teammates better? Who is making the environment better? And who is there trying to work on their very specific individualized things? And obviously that stuff is important, right? That you can't really be a Major League Baseball player without improving your tangible skills. But again, it's a mentality thing. And I think it's something that you can actually pick up on even more so in spring training than you can in the regular season, because there's all kinds of backstage access and stuff like that. So that's sort of how I'm approaching my fan viewership of spring training. And I think it's telling what a lot of these guys say in their interviews, how they approach certain, situations in the game and things of that nature. So here we go. It's gonna be it's time. It's time to take some callers. And like I said, I'm gonna be I'm open to taking callers whenever you guys want, really, because it's fun. And you guys I've had a lot of requests to take callers, and I've had a lot of success when I have. So every day I'm open to it. Mondays and Thursdays, kind of more so I tailor that into the plan for the day. But if you ever want to call in, comment, the day before or the day of or whatever, let me know. You can DM the Small Ball Instagram, whatever the case may be. Please do call in, because it's great I enjoy it. You guys enjoy it. Excuse me. And everybody wins. So if you want to call in tonight, you can either drop a comment or you can DM the Small Ball Instagram, or if you have my personal information, you can reach me there as well. So here we go. And again, there's no real like direction for these calls. There's no like specific things that I need you guys to, talk about or not talk about. Whatever the case is, maybe down the road we'll get into that stuff. But here we go. We have our first caller of the day. It is Matt Geiling from New York. Matt, how are you doing this fine evening?
Hey, Tristan, I'm doing well. Just watching the show.
Nice.
So I know that you primarily talk about majors in the big league, obviously, but you've recently talked about preparation for the season and kind of preventing injuries. And I was just wondering on a lower level, like you get to like high school and even middle school, I hear stories, see a lot of kids get burnt out really early in their careers, or not careers, really just like playing as a kid. And like, cause you see these kids trying to make it, and like the coaches will throw them like 70+ pitches, like multiple times in a week, and it's just like awful for their arms. So I just wanted to know, like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, what do you think a lot of teams, like younger teams, need to do better to prevent these kids from kind of hurting themselves so often, especially pitchers?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that's been really noticeable over the last couple of years. Even there was a point in time, and it really wasn't that long ago. And I'm not that old, but it was in my lifetime where, like I said, the off season for youth baseball players was not playing baseball. It was playing other sports. It was staying active. It was being competitive, which I think is something that is really overlooked and something that needs to be addressed a little bit more. Just having that competitive spirit sort of throughout the off season. For example, playing another competitive team sport where you're actually, playing competitive games rather than just sort of individualized training, or whatever the case may be. It could even be, a pickup game of whatever, I played a lot of wiffle ball growing up. I played a lot of basketball, in the park growing up. And I think it's beneficial in a lot of ways. I mean, one of the ways, obviously, like I said, is staying competitive, right? Because if you're off-season training, there's so much talk about like, day one of the season, opening day, and how difficult it is to, get back into that rhythm. And I think one of the biggest reasons for that is people haven't been in that competitive mindset for about 9 months or however long the off season is. If you play summer baseball, right, and you finish the season and your entire athletic, profile over the last 9 months has been you're by yourself in the gym, right? No competition, no real sense of like team mentality, right? Of course, it's going to be difficult to get back into that rhythm. So the other reason is in baseball in particular, it's such like a fine motor skills kind of sport that I really don't think the human body can handle such specific repetitive activities, right? Obviously, for a pitcher, we know the importance of limiting, pitch counts and even in the off season, bullpens and stuff like that. But even for hitters, I mean, hitting is something, if I hit, 100, whatever it is, 100 BP swings or whatever, I get tired, but I also feel sore in some very specific areas, so it's not really like basketball where it's kind of like a whole body soreness and then you can kind of build that up. I don't think that these muscles are really meant to be, in action constantly. So I think the main thing that kids and coaches can emphasize is staying competitive and, doing other athletic things. I'm a big believer that other sports are really beneficial physically for baseball because there are a lot of muscles that aren't really used in baseball that much. And then when they're needed, they're not really up to speed with everything else, right? So if you're a pitcher, your arm could be, the strongest muscle in your body or your legs or whatever it is that you need to throw, but maybe there's a grounder down the line that you have to make a play on, and you're not as agile as you would hope to be in that situation. So, and it's hard because I think obviously the increase in just this desire, right? And there's so much more talk about, where you can take, this game to and what it can get you, what it can lead you to in life. And like, I think just because of that, there's so much more sort of pressure on kids and it's led to obviously, the response when you're trying to improve in something is to do more of it. And I think obviously it's important to stay stay fresh. And I play baseball 12 months a year, but it's, you got to really learn that limit, and it's different for everyone. But I think, the really important thing is just staying active, staying competitive. So, and I think it translates to the major league, level as well, where there's a lot of these kids now, and they're really kids. I mean, there are guys in our league that are 22, and it was only 5 years ago that they were 17, right? So this approach, I think, has not only led to every pitcher in the league, really, if you Google any starting pitcher in the league, young starting pitcher, there's probably a 90% chance that they had Tommy John, within the last 3 to 4 years. And, I think even from a physical perspective, obviously, but from an emotional perspective, I think it's really difficult to play a professional sport, at a professional team sport at a high level when you really don't have a lot of experience growing up, with competition and team environments. And baseball isn't really that much of a team-oriented game. So I think that playing, basketball or football or hockey or whatever can actually make you a better teammate as well. Whereas playing baseball, a lot of times, you can sort of fly under the radar without being that team guy. So when it's necessary, when you're at the big league level, I think a lot of times it's lacking. So I know that was kind of a long-winded answer, but
that's good. That's good. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's definitely something that people think of in youth baseball for sure. And I think people, sort of assume that once you get to the major league level, you kind of know what you're doing. You kind of, obviously there are coaches to help you out. And so they kind of dismiss the importance. But obviously, the way you raise yourself and the way you're raised as a kid is obviously going to have an impact on your mentality, your work ethic, and just your sort of what you prioritize later in life. And I think it's had an effect on a lot of young players. I think maybe, like I said, it might be leading to more injuries for these young players. And there's no real way to tell, right? Because everybody's doing it. But it's definitely something I've never seen. Obviously I'm young and I don't have a lot of experience, but, in talking to some coaches, older parents, they're saying that they've never seen young baseball players getting hurt at this kind of a rate, especially pitchers. So yeah, that's just my opinion. I know that a lot of new. It seems like old school guys sort of lean more towards activity, and new school guys sort of lean more towards baseball specific exercises. So, it's kind of an outdated opinion, but that's what I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you very much.
Of course. If you have anything else, of course, let me know. But if not, I can move on to another caller.
All right, I think I'm good for now.
All right, cool. All right, I'll talk to you later. Please feel free to call back. Thanks, Matt.
All right, yeah.
So yeah, again, and this is kind of a weird topic. Not weird, but it's kind of, not something that we talk about a lot. Is obviously like youth baseball and high school baseball and all that. But I think people really underestimate what kind of an impact the youth game and the high school game and obviously the college game can have on, what we see at 7:00, every night at the major league level, right? And it's this idea of this team mentality, right? And it's impossible to determine who's like a good teammate, who's a bad teammate in the major leagues. But I think we all understand that it has an impact, right? So because it's so difficult to quantify, we sort of dismiss its importance because it's really difficult to talk about without all that information. But if you think about it, I think it's really difficult to argue that it doesn't matter, right? So that's sort of what I'm trying to bring to this conversation and this show, and things that we don't always talk about but probably should. So yeah, whatever the case, maybe that's my opinion. So thank you for that question, Matt from New York. And we got another caller here, Dylan Challenger, also from New York. Dylan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, how are you doing? What's up? What's going on? Cool.
So earlier in the show, you were talking a lot about injuries, and I was just wondering how you think the Yankees are going to do, because they already have a bunch of pretty notable injuries, and last year, they had the next man up, and it actually worked really well. A lot of people don't believe that these, second and third string guys are going to be able to take on the load like they did last year. So I was wondering what your thoughts on that were. So do you think the Yankees, bench and role players are going to be as successful as they were last year?
Yeah, so I mean, I've wavered on this opinion a lot because my mentality was kind of, when this stuff started to pop up, I was confident in their ability, and I talked about this on the show. I was confident in their ability to kind of have that same mentality and have that same level of success, but it's gotten to the point now where I sort of assumed that it was going to be maybe 2 or 3 guys, and now it's looking like it's going to be similar to what it was last year. So obviously, the level of the number of injuries as well as the level of how bad these injuries are is going to determine some of that. But all in all, I'm still pretty. I'm not concerned if I'm a Yankee fan, which I am. I think that the big thing that people don't really recognize is that this team is built for that next man up sort of mentality, right? I think we think of a lot of these guys as role players who overperformed, overachieved, but when you look at the dynamic of this roster, when you look at some of the moves that have been made behind the scenes, some of the more under the radar moves, these are guys that they're bringing in, like an Urshela, like a LeMahieu, like a Cameron Maybin, who have all sort of shown the abilities to be productive players, but not only be productive players, all 3 of those players who they added last year to the mix were, I mean, good to great in 1 or 2 areas. I mean, Maybin's always been a very, very strong defensive player, and LeMahieu led the league in hitting back in 2014 with a 347 batting average, and Gio Urshela has always been also an elite defensive player. So when you have a tool that's already very, very strong, obviously it's easier to focus on some of your flaws as a player. And I just think this team is built to withstand that. I do. I mean, I've said countless times they have 9 or 10 legitimate, starting pitchers that will be able to contribute this year. So obviously, it's not, it's going to hurt losing Severino. It's going to hurt losing Paxton for a bit. Herman's out with a suspension. And I look at that and I sort of say it's a really good thing that, Brian Cashman and this staff has assembled the team the way it has, because if you come into a season, assuming that everybody's going to be healthy, you're probably not going to be successful, because realistically, especially on the pitching side, that's not going to happen. And a lot of people have said, there's too many starting pitchers, there's too many relievers, there's too many good relievers, too many good third basemen, we have 2 of them. But I look at that and I say that's an opportunity for depth. That's an opportunity when somebody goes down, when somebody underperforms, to step up. So a lot of people were surprised with, how well they did last year and what they were able to do, missing a lot of key players. But to me, when you look at this roster, it's not really something that is so out of the question for them to actually be able to repeat. So, like I said, they lose now 3 starting pitchers, which is 60% of their opening day rotation. But they have, 8, 9, maybe even 10 guys on the roster that can easily contribute. And another thing that's important to understand is that this team is so talented that it's hard to imagine a scenario in which they don't make the playoffs. So in a lot of cases, obviously, not Severino, but some of these other guys, it might actually be a little bit of a benefit to get them some rest, get them, maybe a little bit of rehab, working on specific things that maybe they didn't have a chance to in the off season. So that when the playoffs or even the playoff push, do roll around, some of these guys maybe are a little bit even fresher than they would be had they played a full season. So from, specifically talking about the Yankees, I don't think I would be concerned at this point. Not only, should you expect injuries, but also the guys who are getting hurt are sort of some of the guys that you would have expected. And you never really expect guys to go down per se, but some of the more injury-prone guys are on that list. So I think, the Yankees and Brian Cashman have done a very good job preparing for, what could and what has happened. Their outfield depth is depleted at this point, and they're looking into other options. I've heard rumors that they're talking to Yasiel Puig. But again, like Stanton and Judge go down, Hicks is out until I think July or whatever. That's honestly probably their 3 starting outfielders. And still today on March 9th, we're looking at an outfield of 3 very productive players on opening day. So I think that just speaks to how they've built this team and the preparation and what they've been able to do in that department. And again, obviously signing Cole is huge and all that kind of stuff, but it's some of these other moves that I think set them up very nicely as well for the season, but also, like I said, even more so in the playoffs. But it is a legitimate concern. I mean, I understand, and the biggest concern is you just don't know where it's going to end, right? But that's kind of how I feel. All in all, to answer your question, I would not be concerned. Other teams I would be, and I don't think other teams are built to withstand, what's going on to the Yankees. But yeah, I wouldn't be concerned. But that's my opinion. Obviously, it could change depending on some bigger, not bigger. I mean, some big pieces have gone down, but some other key pieces go down. But at this point, I think I would be confident in the Yankees this year. I do think actually the Dodgers might eclipse them in the regular season because of some of these injuries. But I think when the postseason rolls around, I think they'll be definitely ready to go.
All right.
Cool.
Yeah.
Anything else? That was a good question. If there's any other questions, feel free to fire away, of course. But if not, totally fine as well.
I agree with what you said. I think their offensive depth is unbelievable, and the fact that they can have just Andujar or Talkman or Gardy or Frazier just step in for their injured outfielders is great. Yeah. And I don't think offense is really going to miss a beat, but I'm a little concerned about their pitching because their offense has proved itself, and their pitching hasn't really in the past few years. So, I'm kind of concerned with Happ being a 3-starter for this opening day, maybe.
For sure. And I think, again, the way I kind of look at that is they're just so talented offensively and defensively, and obviously in the bullpen as well, that, if they're well managed, and I think Aaron Boone has improved a lot as a manager over his last 2 years, I think, with some holes in the regular season, I think that's definitely workable, right? When you just take their division, for example, if they got a set against Baltimore, if they got a set even against Toronto, you can sort of mix and match and get guys rest when needed. And then if you roll around, you got to play Tampa, or you got to play Boston, or one of the premier teams in the American League. Not having as much depth, in the regular season, I think if with good management, I think is workable, right? Because you can sort of, you can get guys rest where needed. You can maybe start, a spot starter against Baltimore or whatever the case may be. So I think Happ is a good example of that, where, maybe in the postseason, not somebody that you can feel confident rolling out there against, Houston or whoever, Minnesota or whoever. But in the regular season, if you can get him some innings against some of the lower class teams, and give some of the guys that you're really counting on and relying on down the road some rest, obviously they're going to be, if you have a big series against a top level team. But that's kind of why I wouldn't be concerned. And obviously also, I mean, this isn't necessarily ideal for the current season, but it also gives a lot of guys an opportunity to prove themselves. Like you just said, the offense has proved themselves, the starting pitching, not so much. So now there's going to be a lot of guys thrown into that mix, like a Montgomery, like Loaizaga, maybe even Deivi Garcia, who are going to have that opportunity. So, that's a plus too when you look at it from that perspective. So, I wouldn't be really concerned. And like I said, there isn't really a scenario that I can see in which they fall out of playoff contention. Even with, a Happ, so maybe a Happ, Montgomery, Loaizaga back 3, that's definitely not, a 3, 4, 5 that's going to hold you back. I mean, I think they're clearly competent, especially with that offense and defense, and what they're able to do and compensate for maybe some deficiencies in other areas. But I wouldn't really be concerned about that. And maybe even, it gives some of these younger guys an opportunity that they wouldn't have otherwise gotten. So, and obviously, something that gets overlooked also is the importance of having such a deep bullpen and such a good bullpen. Obviously, it helps you late in games, but it also gives you a little bit more flexibility with the starting pitchers. If they aren't able to give you as much length as you hope. The Yankees have guys that aren't even in their bullpen right now that are productive relievers as well. So that's going to help too. If there's a young guy that, sort of maybe like a Garcia that maybe isn't giving you the length that you want, or maybe isn't giving you even the production that you want, having that depth in the bullpen really gives you that flexibility, to come in earlier in games and take some of the pressure off, or even, throw an entire game and give the rotation another day of rest if needed. So I think, like I said, the Yankees are built to withstand this kind of a thing. Other teams are not. And I think if the weakness going into the season is, J Happ, I think you're kind of in a pretty good place. Obviously, he's had his struggles, but, if he's kind of what you're concerned about, I would look at some of the other teams and see, some much more worrisome, holes that they have. So, yeah, I would not really be concerned, like I said. And if needed, obviously there's the trade deadline, and it's going to be really interesting to see if the Yankees feel like they need to add. I don't know. Obviously, we'll get into that stuff, when it approaches. But that's another option too that people, don't always aren't always thinking about at this point in the season. Obviously, in July, if there is a significant, substantial hole, they can go that route as well. So yeah.
All right.
Cool. Anything else, or is that going to do it for your call?
I think that's all from me.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you for calling. Thanks again. Yeah, so much to Dylan and Matt, both from New York, to call in today. Really, really good stuff. This injuries thing, again, like if you look back, it's really not that out of the ordinary. I mean, a lot of guys, especially pitchers, are dealing with stuff, in spring training. And, it's obviously it's alarming, and it's a little bit confusing even when the off season is really meant to get, players healthy and then they're not, come spring training. But I'm not going to go back into that preparation stuff. But again, yeah, I mean, it's an analytics thing. Analytics isn't the right word. It's more of like a data sort of technology driven, even sort of an issue. So that's how I feel about that from from the perspective of the Yankees. To address that question, they are, of any, more so than any team really, are built for that. And I think that that's something that I've talked about that gets overlooked is that they've built this team to prepare for that, right? A lot of teams are now focused on, we need to find a left fielder, we need to find, a fourth starter, we need to find, our seventh inning guy. The Yankees, and obviously some, pretty substantial talent has given them the ability and the flexibility to do so, but their mentality is right now focused on, okay, how do we solidify our roster 1 to 26, with guys that can contribute. And I think that has really set them up to withstand something like this, especially for a team that has some guys, some bigger guys, maybe, some pitchers with injury history. Most staffs have pitchers with injury history, but, some guys that maybe do get banged up a little bit more than other teams. So obviously it becomes even more important in that regard. So enough of that stuff. We're going to move on to my AL West predictions. So here we go. It is our final division to do. We've done obviously we've done the NL East, NL Central, NL West, AL East, and AL Central. We're going to wrap up today with the AL West. So let's get to it. Number 5, I have the Mariners. Now, yeah, I mean, the Mariners don't really have any, real pluses on their roster. Their rotation is mediocre at best. Their lineup is not very good. Their defense is even worse. And their bullpen is really not, going to do a lot of good things, honestly. So it's sort of a weird situation there in Seattle, and they've sort of, embraced this rebuild, but they haven't really fully yet. Jared Kalenic, to me, is sort of, it's who they're sort of building their farm system around. I don't really see him as a top flight prospect at this point. I see him as, a solid MLB player, later in his career, but I don't really think his ceiling is as high as a lot of people think. I don't really think he has one tool that stands out. His defense is pretty good, but I don't really see him as that kind of a guy. And I don't think they're going to win a lot of games, especially, and we're going to talk about this obviously, but this division's really, really strong. So I don't see them, navigating this division with any more than 62 wins. I have them going 62 and 100. I have a few teams losing 100 games. They're one of them. That's a lot. I mean, I think it's actually substantially lower than their Vegas over-under. So I don't, really have anything good to say about the Mariners. I have them coming in 5th, 62 and 100. Now, number 4, here's where it gets a little testy. I have the Rangers 78 and 84. So that obviously sounds, pretty reasonable. Most people have the Rangers coming in 4th. I actually, to be honest, would not be surprised if the Rangers actually beat out my 3rd place team on this list, which might surprise some people. The Rangers, to me, their rotation is underrated. I think Kluber is poised for a bounce-back year, new environment. Who knows what he was dealing with last year? Maybe it was an injury or whatever the case may be. I expect he'll bounce back. I mean, he's been, a top-level pitcher in this game, for his entire career. And last year, I think he had like a 5.31 ERA or something ridiculous like that. So he'll bounce back. I'm pretty confident in that. This lineup, so to me, the big question mark is defense, right? So they lose Delino DeShields, who's held down center field for a while. I think Joey Gallo is overrated as a defender. Robinson Chirinos behind the plate doesn't really add much. Elvis Andrus is getting up there and in age, and defensively, this team is going to struggle. But I think the starting, rotation can sort of compensate for some of that. And offensively, I mean, it's going to be a pretty stagnant lineup. It's not going to create a lot of runs. You have Gallo, you have Odor, a lot of guys that, Willie Calhoun, a lot of guys that, can add some runs via the home run, via maybe some extra base hits and stuff, but there isn't going to be a lot of run creation. They don't run the bases very well at all. Not a lot of team speed. So, they're going to really be relying on a lot of power from some of those guys. And I don't think, they're going to hold up over, the course of a full season. But again, I like the staff. The bullpen is not good, really at all. And the defense is pretty questionable. The lineup has some pieces, but I think, Gallo is not quite as productive as a lot of people think, and same with Odor, and Andrus I really like, but he's getting up there. So, I think, like I said, this is not going to be a team that creates a lot of runs. They might score a little bit, but against the top-level teams, I think they're going to struggle in that department. So, and they're going to have to ride these starters, and they're not deep, right? They have 3 guys that can really throw in the rotation. Kluber, Lynn, Minor, and the back end of the rotation is a little weak. They don't have a lot of depth, so if some guys go down, and then, the bullpen isn't really where it needs to be either. So not a lot of wiggle room for the Rangers. But I have them going 78 and 84. I like this staff. I could actually see them. It's possible. I don't have them doing it, but I can actually see them finishing ahead of the Angels. And I've heard actually some Angels, some predictions that have the Angels winning the AL West. I don't see that at all. I have them going 81 and 81, so 500, 3 games ahead of the Rangers. But this lineup has so many holes. It's probably the most top-heavy team in Major League Baseball. The rotation is really, really lacking. Griffin Canning now even is out with an injury. This bullpen it's questionable. It has I think it has some pieces that could, maybe perform, better than people think, but there is no wiggle room, on the defensive side. I think their defense is pretty good, but this pitching staff and this bullpen, not a lot of wiggle room. A lot of times, if you have one, you can use one to compensate for the other with, if managed well. But when you're lacking in both, that becomes exponentially difficult to sort of address and navigate because, when one struggles, the other one isn't really able to pick them up. So, and not only, this is the big thing with the Angels to me, and why people I think are wrong on them. I think people look at this team as a team that needs pitching help badly and is going to give up a lot of runs, but has an offense that can compensate, right? An offense, so it's sort of like a high-level offense, low-level pitching staff. This offense to me is really not that great. It's obviously we know the addition of Rendon. Obviously, Mike Trout, as a lot of people think, is the best player in the game, and Simmons has turned himself around offensively. But the back end of this lineup and defense is a huge, huge hole. They need a lot of help. They don't get Jock Peterson, who I've been critical of over his career, but I actually would have liked that fit, in Los Angeles, the other Los Angeles in Anaheim. But they don't get him. They don't. There's just so many holes. There's not, again, like the Rangers, not a lot of run creation, not a lot of, abilities to make things happen on the bases and stuff like that. But they really need help. They need, just reinforcements offensively and defensively. So, not a lot of, obviously, wiggle room, like I said, and they don't even really have a lot of pieces they can trade, for those pieces that they might need. Obviously, Joe Adell, if he's able to contribute early, which I think he could be, would be a big help. And, it's top-heavy lineup, so they're going to get a lot of run production from Trout and Rendon and maybe Adell and Simmons and all that. Their defense is very good. I think Simmons and Rendon on the left side is very strong. Obviously, Trout and Adell and, whatever the case may be there. But, behind the plate, they're a little weak. And, Pujols obviously isn't what he used to be. So I think Angels actually going 581 and 81. But I could see them actually falling to fourth. I really could. I don't see them winning this division at all. There's just too many holes and not really, I can't really see a great way for them to fill them. So I have the Angels in third. Now, number 2, I have the Astros. And I think a lot of people still have the Astros winning this division, and a lot of people don't. I think it's a 50-50 split from what I've seen. I think that a lot of the rationale for holding them back, at number 2 is, there's 2 reasons. I think one, it's sort of a feel sort of a thing where they don't like the Astros and they're down on them obviously because of what happened. And, it's sort of more of an emotional pick rather than a logical pick. And the logical side is that this cheating, obviously when stripped away from them, some of these players are not going to perform as well. I don't really see that as much. They have a lot of guys, Bregman, Altuve, a lot of guys that have actually performed better on the road over the course of their careers, especially the last couple of years. So I don't really think they're going to fall off that much, from that in particular. I do think they're going to come down because keep this in mind. They're a young team, fairly young team. And with all this talk and all of this, the booing and all that stuff, it's very difficult to be able to respond to that, especially early in the year, right? I think they're going to lose a lot more games because of that early in the year. As the season progresses, maybe they sort of, are able to figure that out. They have Dusty Baker to lead them through it, which I think is, obviously very, very helpful. But it's going to hold them back. It's going to be difficult to respond. Obviously, they lose Garrett Cole, who I think, had the best season in baseball last year. I used to think of him as the best player in baseball. I mean, there's some. I'll get into more Garrett Cole stuff later, but I think being on the Astros helped him, and we'll get to that stuff later. But I think offensively, I mean, tangibly speaking, to be honest, I think they're gonna be just fine. But they do lose their best starter, and they don't. I don't know how they're going to respond. They have a lot of personalities on this team that I don't even think. I mean, and we've seen it from these interviews and stuff. And I think some of the stuff they've been saying is telling. It doesn't seem like they're responding that well to, the backlash and what's been going on. So I think they're going to lose a lot of games, just, intangibly speaking, on that kind of stuff. And obviously, they lose their best player. So, arguably their best player. I think Bregman's going to have a great season. I picked him to win the MVP. You saw my video last week. So, but I think there's a lot of guys that are gonna struggle with this criticism and new manager. Right? There's a lot of things that, especially early in the year, are going to be difficult for them to overcome. I have them going in 91 and 71. I still think they're a playoff team. They have a lot of talent. But I do think the A's are stronger. So I have the Astros coming in second. I think they're going to go 91 and 71. I have the A's winning the AL West 94 and 68, 3 games ahead of the Astros. So the A's, to me, are an underrated team. The best defense in baseball, in my opinion. Matt Chapman, Marcus Semien on the left side is the best in the game. Ramon Laureano has turned into an exceptional outfielder. Matt Olson is very, very solid at first. Question marks at second. Not sure, who's going to be there. Maybe Franklin Barreto is able to come up and, produce a little bit better than he has. The prospect Franklin Barreto. Maybe even Jurickson Profar. Behind the plate, if Sean Murphy is up with the Major League roster, I've talked about this on numerous occasions. I think Sean Murphy is the next great defensive catcher in this game. Arm is there. Blocking is there. Receiving is, needs a little bit of work. He's athletic. He's strong. Could be a little bit more agile, but arm is there. I think IQ is there. I think he's the next great defensive catcher in this game. And I think he can hit too, honestly. I mean, he's performed, right? He's like 850 OPS, I think, in his short time in the majors. He said like 280, something like that. So I think he's legit. Like I said, defensively, I think he's as good as they come behind the plate. As far as young catchers go, I think he's going to contribute offensively as well. This team can create runs. Also, they have guys that can create runs. Semien, last couple of years, run totals are out. Out the building. Laureano can create a little bit. Matt Olson played 162 games last year. Actually, maybe the year before. Good K rate, can make things happen. Good base runner, not particularly fast, but this team is going to create runs. And Matt Chapman has turned into a star player. I think he's on the cusp of becoming a superstar if he can have a little bit more consistency offensively. Maybe the best all-around defensive player in the game. Offensively, obviously, last year, I think he had, 37 home runs or something like that. So, he's really turned his game around offensively. Semien, to me, is a top 3 defensive player. Last year had an incredible offensive season, was 3rd in MVP voting. And this pitching staff, to be honest, is not great, but it's deep. And it's young, so a lot of guys that maybe are even going to be better than we think. Jesus Luzardo, AJ Puck. Mike Fiers is a great veteran to have. This bullpen is really strong with Treinen and, Puck if he stays in the pen. Maybe Luzardo even stays in the pen. So some question marks there, especially because of some younger players that we don't really know about yet. But this staff is deep. This bullpen is deep and has some pieces that, Treinen, I think, has shown the ability to be a top-level closer. I mean, at times, I think he's had some inconsistency. But like I said, defensively, his team is exceptional. I think they create runs better than any team in this division. I think that they have a lot of guys that can really make things happen on the bases. They can hit, a little bit for power, but the contact rate is really, really exceptional. Like I said, the defense and this pitching staff is so deep. And they're built like the Yankees to withstand, maybe some injuries or guys that underperform. The offense, maybe not as much, although they do have some depth. But I think that this pitching staff is a little bit underrated, and especially if they get, the right guy behind the plate, and maybe that's Sean Murphy. Obviously rookies don't always know how to manage a pitching staff perfectly, but I think his IQ is there. Scouts, rave about what he's able to do with a pitching staff. So if they get the right guy there, this is a young staff that can benefit from that, tremendously. So I say look out for the A's. I think they're almost even ready for the postseason too, and maybe to do some things there. I think they have, obviously they lost in the wild card game last year, sort of an upset, a little bit of an upset there. And again, they're young. They have a lot of veterans who are just starting to come into their, full selves. So I think the experience wasn't really there last couple of years. I think now it might be. This team is good. This team is really good defensively, like I said, and I think this team is even underrated. Like I said, I have them going 94 and 68 to win the AL West. And that finishes third in the American League in my predictions. I have the Yankees, Twins, A's, and then, in the wild card, have the Astros. Then it gets tough. My prediction is the Indians, though. I think the Indians are strong. And I want to, on that topic, so that's a pretty good segue, I was going to talk about the big news of the day to me, which is Francisco Lindor, came out and said that he doesn't want to continue contract extension talks. So we're about to wrap up. We only have a couple minutes left, so I'm going to save the bulk of that for tomorrow or maybe even the next day. I'm not sure yet, but he said that he doesn't want to continue the talks, so sort of putting that on hold, and we'll see what happens there with Lindor, and we're gonna get down to some of that stuff tomorrow. So thanks again so much for watching. Just to recap, we talked about some AL West predictions. We had two really good callers today that gave us some interesting questions. That kind of went on a little bit longer than I anticipated, which is totally fine. Always love having callers. It's a lot of fun for everyone. So didn't get to everything I had planned for today, but get back to it tomorrow. Garrett Cole stuff I want to talk about too. I think that he isn't going to maybe quite have the year that he had last year. Last year I thought he was the best player in the league, but new environment. I'm not sure how he's going to respond. We'll get to some specifics on that later. But I think he's a good pickup. Tough loss for the Astros, of course. Very interesting what he's going to be able to do this year. A lot of people have him going first, like in fantasy, and I don't know. I mean, we're gonna talk about it, and we'll go from there. So some Garrett Cole stuff tomorrow. Maybe my predictions for him. I didn't have him winning the Cy Young in my predictions, so that's telling too. But thank you again so much for watching. If you called in, thanks again for calling. A lot of fun today. Back at it tomorrow. Like I said, I apologize for last week. It was kind of rough with the show, but new schedule coming out, new logo hopefully coming soon. Maybe new timing, scheduling, stuff like that. But again, thanks for watching. Leave a comment if you have obviously anything to that you want me in particular to discuss. And yeah, have a good night. There was something else that I wanted to ask of you guys. I guess it was just comments. Yeah, so comment if you have anything you want to say, or if you have anything you want me to say. Thanks again for watching. Subscribe, like, all that stuff. Notifications button, that's big. Notifications button is big because timing isn't always consistent here. So yeah, so you get those notifications. Thanks again for watching. Have a great night. See you again tomorrow, Tuesday, on Small Ball. Another Tuesday top 10 tomorrow. Of course, right fielders, which should be really fun. I think it's going to be the most interesting one. So maybe pitchers. Maybe pitchers might be a little more interesting. But like I said, thanks again so much for watching. Have a good night. Garrett Cole stuff tomorrow, Astro stuff, new addition for the Yankees, and some stuff to talk about there with GC. But I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.